I thought I knew my family until Thanksgiving dinner showed me how wrong I could be. Walking into my parents' house with my 14-year-old daughter Emma, I expected the usual awkward small talk and overcooked turkey. Instead, I witnessed my mother Margaret rush past us like we were invisible, sweeping my brother Ryan's daughter Sophie into her arms with an envelope that would change everything. Sophie's scream of joy echoed through the foyer as she read about her $4,200 Europe school trip. Mom kissed her forehead and whispered, "You're special." Then Emma opened her gift bag finding discount store socks and enduring a lecture about not being materialistic. The drive home felt like traveling through thick fog. Emma stared out the passenger window of my Honda Civic, her reflection ghostly against the November darkness. Neither of us spoke as I navigated the familiar streets toward our modest apartment complex. The silence wasn't comfortable. It was heavy, suffocating, filled with all the words we couldn't bring ourselves to say. I parked in our assigned spot and killed the engine. The sudden quiet amplified everything. Emma's shallow breathing, the distant hum of traffic, the weight of what had just happened settling between us like an unwelcome passenger. "Dad," Emma's voice cracked slightly. "Can we order pizza tonight?" Her attempt at normalcy broke something inside my chest. "Of course, sweetheart, whatever you want." Inside our two-bedroom apartment, Emma disappeared into her room while I fumbled for my phone, scrolling through delivery apps without really seeing the options. The living room felt smaller than usual, cramped with furniture I'd bought secondhand after the divorce. Everything here told the story of starting over, of making do, of building a life from scratch when your world falls apart. 20 minutes later, we sat cross-legged on the carpet, sharing a large pepperoni pizza straight from the box. Emma picked at her slice, pulling off pieces of cheese and rolling them between her fingers. "I'm not hungry anymore," she said, setting down her barely touched food. "Emma." I set my own slice aside and turned to face her fully. "Talk to me." The dam burst. Tears streamed down her cheeks as 2 years of accumulated hurt poured out in broken sentences. Why don't they love me the same way Dad? What did I do wrong? Sophie gets everything and I get socks. Actual socks, from the dollar store. I could see the price tag they forgot to remove. My heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. You didn't do anything wrong. Not one single thing. But they must think I did. Emma wiped her nose on her sleeve. Remember Sophie's birthday party last month? She got that MacBook Pro and I got a used children's book about sharing. About sharing Dad. Like I need to learn how to be less selfish when I never ask for anything. The memory hit me like a physical blow. I'd watched Sophie unwrap her laptop while my daughter smiled politely and thanked my parents for a picture book meant for 7-year-olds. I'd made excuses in my head telling myself my parents were just trying to teach different values. "Tell me about other times," I said quietly. Emma's voice grew stronger as the words spilled out. "Last Christmas, Sophie got that expensive art set and private lessons with some famous local artist. I got a coloring book and a box of 16 crayons. At Easter, she found $100 in her egg hunt. I found chocolate coins and a lecture about appreciating simple pleasures. Each example felt like another nail in the coffin of my relationship with my family. How had I missed the pattern? How had I convinced myself these were isolated incidents rather than systematic favoritism? And it's not just the gifts," Emma continued. "They remember every detail about Sophie's life. Her soccer scores, her science fair projects, her friend drama. But they never ask about my debate team or my honor roll certificates or anything that matters to me." I thought about my divorce from Emma's mother Lisa 2 years earlier. The process had been messy, emotional, and expensive. My parents had made their disapproval clear from the beginning, suggesting I should have tried harder to save the marriage, implying I was selfish for wanting happiness over stability. Meanwhile, my brother Ryan had sailed through life effortlessly. Harvard Law School partnership at a prestigious firm, marriage to his college sweetheart Amanda, 2 perfect children in their perfect suburban house. He'd never struggled with anything, never faced criticism, never had to rebuild his life from the ground up. I need to look into something, I told Emma, moving toward my laptop on the kitchen table. What kind of something? Financial records, public documents. I want to understand exactly what's been happening in this family. Emma joined me at the table, watching as I navigated through county records and property databases. My parents owned their house, outright bought and paid for 30 years ago when real estate was affordable. But recent filings showed something interesting. Dad, what does second mortgage mean? I pointed at the screen showing my parents had borrowed against their house 6 months ago. It means they used their home as collateral to get cash, $50,000 in cash. Why would they need that much money? Before I could answer, more documents loaded. Property transfers, bank records that were part of public filings. My parents had transferred $50,000 to Ryan last month as a down payment gift for his new house. The same month, I'd struggled to pay Emma's school activity fees and had eaten ramen noodles for dinner more nights than I cared to admit. Emma, go brush your teeth and get ready for bed. I need to make some phone calls. Are you going to fix this? I looked at my daughter's hopeful face and made a promise I wasn't sure I could keep. I'm going to try. After Emma went to bed, I sat in my living room with my laptop researching private investigators. The idea felt dramatic, maybe even paranoid, but I needed to understand the full scope of what was happening. My family wasn't just playing favorites. They were systematically supporting Ryan's lifestyle while leaving Emma and me to struggle alone. I found a highly rated investigator named Sarah Coleman, who specialized in financial investigations. Her website mentioned experience with family disputes and asset tracking. I sent an email explaining my situation in basic terms, asking if she could help me understand my family's financial patterns. Within an hour, she responded. Yes, she could help. Her rates were reasonable and she could start immediately. I authorized the investigation, knowing I was crossing a line I couldn't uncross. As I prepared for bed, I realized this Thanksgiving had revealed something I'd been willfully blind to for years. My parents didn't just prefer Ryan. They actively discriminated against Emma because of choices I'd made as an adult. They were punishing my daughter for my divorce, for my financial struggles, for not being their golden child's offspring. The anger that filled my chest felt clean and righteous. Emma deserved better than discount store socks and lectures about materialism while her cousin got European vacations. She deserved grandparents who celebrated her achievements and remembered her birthday and treated her like she mattered. Looking at the investigator's email one more time, I knew I was about to open a door I might regret. But watching Emma cry over a pair of dollar store socks had clarified something fundamental. Sometimes protecting your child means going to war with people you love. Sometimes being a good father means being willing to burn bridges to build better ones. I closed my laptop and tried to sleep, knowing tomorrow would begin a journey that would either heal my family or destroy it completely. Monday morning arrived with the bitter taste of determination. I dropped Emma at school, watching her walk toward the building with shoulders slightly hunched still, carrying the weight of Thanksgiving disappointment. At 35, I'd learned to read my daughter's moods in the set of her posture, and today she looked defeated. My office at Henderson Accounting occupied the third floor of a downtown building that had seen better decades. Nothing glamorous, but honest work that kept us fed and housed. My colleague David knocked on my cubicle wall around 10 in the morning, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You look like hell, Jake," he said, settling into the chair beside my desk. "Rough holiday." David had been my closest friend since college, the only person who'd stood by me through the divorce when other friends chose sides. He knew about my complicated family dynamics, but had never heard the full extent. I told him about Thanksgiving, about Sophie's $4,200 trip and Emma's dollar store socks, about the pattern of favoritism that had become impossible to ignore. "That's messed up, man." David shook his head. "What are you going to do about it?" "I hired a private investigator." "Seriously, that's hardcore. I need to know what I'm dealing with before I confront anyone. There's something deeper going on here." My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah Coleman. She'd found several interesting financial patterns and wanted to meet for lunch to discuss preliminary findings. We arranged to meet at a quiet diner across town where we wouldn't be overheard. Sarah turned out to be a no-nonsense woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a methodical way of organizing documents. She spread papers across our corner booth like she was solving a complex puzzle. "Your family's financial situation is more complicated than you probably realize," she began. "Let's start with the obvious. Your parents have given your brother Ryan significant amounts of money over the past 2 years. Not just the $50,000 for his house. I found evidence of multiple transfers." She showed me bank records that made my stomach drop. $20,000 last Christmas. $15,000 in June for what appeared to be a family vacation. $10,000 in September for reasons unlisted. "How did you get these records?" "Some are public filings. Others came from sources I can't discuss. Your brother's law practice has been struggling financially for over a year." "Struggling how?" "Client complaints, late payments to vendors. He's been borrowing against future settlements to cover operating expenses. It's legal but risky. Several clients have filed complaints with the State Bar Association about delayed communications and missed deadlines." The revelation stunned me. Ryan had always presented himself as wildly successful, driving expensive cars, and living in that pristine suburban house. His family took elaborate vacations and sent their children to elite private schools. There's more. Sarah pulled out another folder. "Your parents remortgaged their house 6 months ago. The proceeds went directly to covering some of Ryan's business debts." "How much are we talking about total?" "Your parents have given Ryan approximately $130,000 over the past 18 months. They've depleted their retirement savings and put their house at risk." I felt nauseated. While I'd been working overtime to afford Emma's school supplies and occasional family dinner out, my parents had been pouring their life savings into my brother's failing business. "What about inheritances, wills? Any documentation about future plans?" Sarah's expression grew serious. "That's where things get interesting. I found records of your grandmother's estate from 3 years ago. She left specific provisions for her grandchildren's education funds. My grandmother Helen had died when Emma was 11. I remembered her funeral, remembered Ryan handling all the legal paperwork because he was the family lawyer. I'd been grieving and overwhelmed with single parenthood, grateful someone else could manage the complicated details. Your grandmother established a trust fund specifically for her grandchildren's educational expenses, $25,000 each for college or other educational opportunities." "Each, you mean Emma should have received money?" "According to the original trust documents, yes. But I can't find any record of distributions to your daughter. All payments from the trust have gone to Sophie and Tyler." The betrayal felt physical, like someone had punched me in the chest. "How is that possible?" "Trust administration can be complex. If the trustee makes distributions without proper oversight, beneficiaries might never know they were entitled to anything." "Who was the trustee?" Sarah consulted her notes. "Your father, Paul, with Ryan as co-trustee and legal counsel." Everything clicked into place with horrible clarity. Ryan had positioned himself to control Emma's inheritance while convincing my parents that his own children deserved priority. He'd stolen from my daughter to fund his children's privileged lifestyle. I drove back to the office in a daze, barely able to concentrate on spreadsheets and tax preparations. Around 3 in the afternoon, Emma's school called. She'd gotten detention for the first time in her life, arguing with a teacher about fairness during a class discussion. Picking her up that evening, I saw a change in my daughter's demeanor. The polite, accommodating girl who'd always tried to keep peace was developing an edge. I told Mr. Patterson that some people get advantages they don't deserve, while others work twice as hard for half the recognition, she said as we drove home. He said I was being disrespectful, but I was just stating facts. What brought this on? We were talking about merit versus privilege in history class. I kept thinking about Thanksgiving dinner. Sophie gets a European vacation for being born, and I get socks for being grateful. Where's the merit in that? That evening, my ex-wife Lisa called, her voice tight with concern. Emma's teacher contacted me about her behavior today. She's never gotten detention before. What's going on? I explained the Thanksgiving situation without mentioning the investigation. Lisa had never gotten along with my family, claiming they were manipulative and controlling. At the time, I'd defended them. Now I wondered if she'd seen something I'd missed. "I'm not surprised," Lisa said. "Your parents always treated you like the problem child compared to Ryan. I just didn't realize they'd extend that attitude to Emma." "What do you mean?" "Jake, think about our wedding. They spent more money on Ryan's bachelor party than our entire reception. When Emma was born, they visited twice the first month. When Sophie was born, they practically moved in with Ryan and Amanda for 6 weeks. The patterns had been there all along, hidden behind excuses and rationalizations I'd accepted, because confronting them felt too painful. After hanging up, I sat in my living room while Emma did homework at the kitchen table. My phone buzzed with another text from Sarah. She'd found something else. Something that couldn't wait until our next meeting. "Call me when you're alone," the text read. I waited until Emma was asleep, then called from my car in the parking lot. "I found evidence that Ryan has been actively managing your parents' perception of your financial situation," Sarah said without preamble. "What kind of evidence?" "Email records from your father's account. Ryan has been telling them you make significantly more money than you actually do. He told them you received a promotion and salary increase that never happened. He's been convincing them you don't need financial help while positioning himself as struggling and deserving of support." The manipulation was breathtaking in its scope and cruelty. Ryan hadn't just taken advantage of my parents' generosity. He'd actively sabotaged their relationship with Emma and me by creating false narratives about our circumstances. "There's one more thing," Sarah continued. "I found communication suggesting Ryan is aware you might be investigating family finances. He's been preparing what appears to be a defensive strategy." "What kind of defensive strategy?" "I'm not sure yet, but he's been gathering documentation that could potentially be used to discredit you or make you appear untrustworthy. You need to be very careful about how you proceed." Sitting in my car in the darkness, I realized I was dealing with something far more complex than simple favoritism. This was systematic manipulation designed to isolate Emma and me from family support while enriching Ryan's family at our expense. My brother had stolen my daughter's inheritance, convinced my parents I didn't deserve help, and was now preparing to defend himself against exposure. But he'd underestimated one crucial factor. I would do anything to protect my daughter's future and restore her sense of worth. The investigation was just beginning, but already I could see the scope of betrayal ran deeper than I'd imagined. Emma deserved justice, and I was going to make sure she got it, no matter what it cost me personally. The next evening brought an unexpected invitation. Amanda, Ryan's wife, called to invite Emma and me to Sophie's school concert. "It would mean so much to have family there," she said in that perfectly polished voice she'd cultivated since marrying into success. I accepted, sensing an opportunity to observe family dynamics with my new understanding of what was really happening. Emma seemed excited about the concert, still hoping for connection with grandparents who'd made her feel invisible. Riverside Middle School's auditorium buzzed with proud parents and nervous students preparing for their winter performance. My parents had saved seats in the front row for Ryan's family, while Emma and I found spots several rows back. The seating arrangement felt symbolic, Ryan's family center stage, ours relegated to the audience. Sophie performed a violin solo that was genuinely impressive. She'd clearly received expensive lessons and had natural talent. During her performance, I watched my parents' faces glowing with pride, my mother dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. When Sophie finished, they leaped to their feet with enthusiastic applause. Emma had prepared a piece for the school talent show next month, a dramatic reading she'd been practicing for weeks. I'd mentioned it to my parents twice, but neither seemed to remember or show interest in attending. After the concert, we gathered in the lobby for refreshments. My parents surrounded Sophie gushing about her performance while Emma stood nearby, practically invisible. I watched my daughter's face, carefully seeing her practice the smile she'd perfected to hide disappointment. Sophie, that was extraordinary. My mother Margaret declared, pulling her granddaughter into another embrace. We're going to have to get you into one of those summer music programs at the university. Another expensive opportunity being planned while Emma's achievements went unnoticed and unfunded. My father Paul joined the conversation, his weathered hands resting proudly on Sophie's shoulders. Your grandmother Helen would have been so proud. She always said music was the mark of a cultured person. The mention of my grandmother sparked something sharp in my chest. According to Sarah's investigation, Helen had specifically set aside money for both girls' educational enrichment. Sophie was receiving those opportunities while Emma was being denied her rightful inheritance. Dad, I said, stepping closer to the family circle. Emma's been working on a dramatic reading for her school talent show next month. She'd love to have you and Mom there. My father glanced at Emma with polite but distant interest. That's nice, sweetheart. We'll see if we can make it. The phrase, "we'll see," was family code for probably not going to happen. Emma understood this and excused herself to get some punch, her shoulders sagging slightly. After the concert, I drove to Uncle Tom's house across town. Tom was my father's younger brother, a retired electrician who'd always been the straight shooter in our family. If anyone would give me honest perspective on family dynamics, it would be him. Tom lived in a modest ranch house with his wife Carol. They'd raised 3 children on working-class income without drama or favorites. Tom answered the door in his usual flannel shirt and jeans, surprised to see me on a weeknight. Jake. Come in, come in. Carol's at her book club, but I've got coffee on. We settled in his living room, surrounded by family photos that actually included everyone equally. No golden children or forgotten grandkids in Tom's house. Uncle Tom, I need to ask you about some family history I might not know. Shoot. I told him about the trust fund from my grandmother's estate, about the systematic financial support flowing to Ryan while Emma and I struggled. Tom's expression grew increasingly grave as I laid out what Sarah had discovered. I was wondering when you'd figure it out, he said finally. You knew. I suspected. Your grandmother Helen talked to me about that trust fund before she died. She was very specific about wanting both girls to have equal opportunities. She was worried Ryan might try to manipulate things. My blood chilled. She was worried about Ryan specifically. Tom nodded slowly. Helen was sharp until the end. She saw how Ryan operated, charming, convincing, always positioning himself as the victim when he needed something. She asked me to keep an eye on the trust distributions, but I'm not named in any legal documents. I couldn't access records. What else did she say about Ryan? She loved him, but she wasn't blind to his character. Helen told me Ryan had borrowed money from her several times over the years, always with dramatic stories about temporary setbacks. She eventually realized he was living beyond his means and using family guilt to fund his lifestyle. The revelation that my grandmother had seen through Ryan's manipulation made everything worse. She'd tried to protect Emma's future, but her safeguards had failed. Tom, there's something else. I think Ryan has been lying to Mom and Dad about my financial situation to make sure they don't help us. That would explain some conversations I've overheard at family gatherings. Your parents seem to think you're doing much better financially than you actually are. Ryan mentions your big promotion and new salary quite a bit. What promotion? What new salary? I've been doing the same job for 3 years. Tom's expression hardened. Son, I think you're dealing with something more serious than favoritism. This sounds like deliberate fraud. We talked for another hour, Tom sharing observations about family dynamics I'd been too close to see clearly. Ryan had spent years positioning himself as the successful son who occasionally needed help with temporary setbacks while painting me as the irresponsible divorced father who'd abandoned family values. Driving home, my phone rang. Sarah Coleman's voice sounded urgent. Jake, we need to meet tomorrow morning before work. I found something that changes everything. What kind of something? Documents from your grandmother's estate that were never filed with the court, hidden papers that show her real intentions for the trust fund, and evidence that Ryan has been preparing to blame you for missing money. The next morning, Sarah met me at a coffee shop near my office, carrying a folder that looked thicker than before. Her expression was grim as she spread new documents across our table. Your grandmother wrote a private letter to accompany her will specifically about the trust fund. She wanted you to be the sole administrator, not your father. She was concerned about Ryan's influence over your parents. I read the letter with growing amazement. My grandmother had been crystal clear about her wishes. Emma and Sophie should receive equal distributions for educational purposes, with me overseeing the fund to ensure fairness. This letter was supposed to be read with the will, but it was never presented to the court or to your family. Ryan handled the estate proceedings, and somehow this document disappeared from the file. How did you find it? Your grandmother's attorney kept personal copies of all documents. He retired last year and turned files over to his successor, who's been reviewing old cases. When I contacted him about your grandmother's estate, he found this letter in his private records. The betrayal was staggering. Ryan hadn't just stolen Emma's inheritance. He'd hidden legal documents that would have prevented the theft entirely. There's more, Sarah continued. I found evidence that Ryan has been building a case to accuse you of embezzling from the trust fund. He's been gathering documentation that could make it appear you've been secretly accessing accounts and misusing money. That's impossible. I've never had access to any accounts. I know that, and I can prove it. But Ryan has been creating a paper trail that could be convincing to people who don't understand the technical details. He's been preparing to frame you as the real thief if anyone starts asking questions about missing money. The scope of Ryan's manipulation was breathtaking. He'd stolen from my daughter hidden legal documents, convinced my parents I didn't need help, and was now preparing to destroy my reputation if I tried to expose him. What's our next step? We gather every piece of evidence we can find, and then you decide how you want to proceed. But Jake, you need to understand that once you confront your family with this information, there's no going back. This will change relationships permanently. I thought about Emma getting dollar store socks while her inheritance funded Sophie's European vacation. I thought about my parents risking their house to support Ryan's lies while Emma and I struggled to pay basic expenses. I thought about my grandmother's clear wishes being perverted by the golden child she'd tried to protect us from. Let's gather the evidence, I said. Emma deserves justice, and my parents deserve to know the truth about what their money has been funding. Sarah nodded approvingly. There's one more thing you should know. Your brother has been in communication with several family members, apparently preparing them for the possibility that you might make false accusations about family finances. He's been laying groundwork to discredit anything you might say. The realization that Ryan was actively sabotaging my relationships with extended family members crystallized my resolve. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about Emma's place in our family and whether truth could triumph over manipulation. I was about to go to war with my own brother, armed with evidence of fraud and betrayal that would shatter my parents' perception of their golden child. But Emma deserved grandparents who valued her equally, and she deserved the inheritance our grandmother had specifically intended for her education. The fight was going to be brutal, but some battles are worth the cost. Saturday morning found me sitting in attorney Michelle Roberts' office, surrounded by evidence that painted my family in colors I'd never imagined. Michelle came highly recommended by Sarah Coleman as someone who specialized in estate disputes and family financial fraud. Her law office occupied the top floor of a renovated Victorian house, and her direct approach immediately impressed me. This is one of the most comprehensive cases of family financial manipulation I've seen, Michelle said, reviewing Sarah's investigation files. Your brother has committed several potential felonies: trust fund theft, document concealment, and what appears to be preparation for false accusations against you. What are my legal options? Multiple paths. We can file criminal complaints for the trust fund theft and document hiding. We can pursue civil action to recover Emma's stolen inheritance plus damages. We can report Ryan to the State Bar Association for professional misconduct. Or we can use this evidence to force a private settlement that restores Emma's money without destroying your family. The weight of decision felt enormous. Criminal charges would likely send Ryan to prison and devastate my parents. Civil action would be public and expensive. But doing nothing meant Emma would continue suffering the consequences of her uncle's greed. I want to try confronting the family first, I decided. Give them a chance to make this right voluntarily before we involve the courts. Michelle nodded approvingly. That's often the best approach. But I want you to understand the risks. Ryan has been preparing for this possibility. He might try to discredit you or even file false charges against you first. We need to be ready for anything. That afternoon, I picked up Emma from her friend Katie's house. She seemed more animated than she'd been since Thanksgiving, laughing about some movie they'd watched. Seeing her genuinely happy reminded me why this fight mattered so much. Dad Katie's family is planning a camping trip next summer. She asked if I could come along. Can we afford it? The question hit hard because I knew Emma's stolen inheritance would have easily covered such expenses. Let me look into it, sweetheart. We'll figure something out. You always say we'll figure something out. Sometimes I wish we just had enough money that you didn't have to figure so hard. Her innocent observation broke my heart. Emma had learned to dream small because she'd watched me struggle with every additional expense. Meanwhile, Sophie's dreams were funded by money that rightfully belonged to both girls. That evening, while Emma worked on homework, I drafted a detailed letter to extended family members explaining what I'd discovered. If Ryan had been preparing them for my false accusations, I wanted them to hear the truth first. I documented the stolen inheritance, the hidden legal papers, and the systematic deception that had lasted for years. My childhood friend Marcus came over around 8 in the evening. He'd been my best man at my wedding, and Emma's honorary uncle since her birth. Marcus worked as a detective with the county sheriff's department, and I'd asked him to review the evidence from a law enforcement perspective. "This is solid, Jake," he said, examining Sarah's documentation. "Your brother committed multiple crimes, and you have evidence that would definitely support prosecutions. The hidden letter from your grandmother alone is enough for criminal charges. Will you serve as a witness if this goes public?" "Absolutely. Emma doesn't deserve what's been done to her, and your parents deserve to know they've been manipulated." We spent an hour organizing evidence into clear categories: theft, fraud, manipulation, and planning for false accusations. The documentation was overwhelming and irrefutable. "There's something else you should consider," Marcus said. "Ryan's law practice is already under investigation for client fund management issues. If he's charged with family trust theft, the state bar will likely suspend his license pending investigation. His career is essentially over." The thought of destroying Ryan's livelihood felt heavy, but I reminded myself he'd stolen from my daughter and manipulated our elderly parents into financial jeopardy. Around 9 o'clock, Emma joined us in the living room, curious about our serious discussion. "Dad, are you in some kind of trouble?" "No, sweetheart, but I'm working on solving some family problems that have been going on for too long." "Shukti. Does this have to do with why Grandma and Grandpa treat Sophie differently than me?" Marcus looked at me with raised eyebrows. Even Emma had noticed the favoritism patterns. "Yes, it does. I'm trying to make sure everyone in our family gets treated fairly." "Good," Emma said firmly. "Sophie's nice and I love her, but it's not fair that she gets everything while I get lectures about being grateful for nothing." After Emma went to bed, I called my Uncle Tom to give him advance warning about what I planned to do. He deserved to know the family was about to face a crisis. "I've been expecting this call for months," Tom said. "Your parents aren't going to want to believe this initially. Ryan has been their success story for so long that admitting he's been manipulating them will be devastating. Do you think they'll side with him even when faced with evidence? Your mother might initially. She's invested so much pride in Ryan's accomplishments that acknowledging his deception will feel like admitting she's been a fool. Your father is more practical. If you show him bank records and legal documents, he'll accept the truth." "What about the rest of the family?" "Mixed reactions. Some have suspected Ryan was too good to be true. Others will be shocked. But most will rally around Emma once they understand she's been cheated out of her inheritance. The next morning, Sarah called with final pieces of evidence that completed our understanding of Ryan's schemes. "I found the smoking gun," she announced. "Ryan has been accessing the trust fund accounts using forged signatures. I have bank records showing multiple withdrawals signed with your name, but handwriting analysis proves they're forgeries." "He's been signing my name to steal money from Emma's account?" "Exactly. And he's been doing it for over a year, creating documentation that could make it appear you've been embezzling if anyone superficially examined the records." The audacity of Ryan's criminal behavior was staggering. He hadn't just stolen from Emma, he'd been systematically building a case to frame me for his own crimes. "There's going to be a family gathering next weekend for my nephew Tyler's 16th birthday," I told Sarah. "I'm going to present all this evidence publicly and give everyone a chance to make things right." "Are you sure you want to do it that way? Public confrontations can backfire." Ryan has been manipulating private conversations for years. The only way to stop his lies is to present irrefutable evidence where everyone can see it at once. I spent the rest of the week preparing for what would either heal my family or destroy it completely. But Emma deserved justice, and my grandmother's wishes deserved respect. Sometimes protecting the people you love requires courage to face the people who've betrayed them. The birthday party was going to be more eventful than anyone expected. Tyler's 16th birthday party at Ryan's house showcased exactly the kind of extravagance that had become normal for his family. The suburban estate sat on 2 acres of manicured lawn, complete with a 3-car garage and swimming pool. Emma and I arrived carrying a carefully wrapped gift, a book about astronomy that Tyler had mentioned wanting, while I carried a leather folder containing enough evidence to end my brother's career. The party was already in full swing when we walked through the front door. Relatives I hadn't seen since Thanksgiving filled the spacious living room while teenagers clustered around an elaborate dessert table. Amanda had outdone herself with decorations, hiring a professional party planner for what looked like a celebration costing several $1,000s. My parents stood near the fireplace, my mother wearing a new dress that probably cost more than Emma's monthly school lunch budget. They greeted us with polite smiles but immediately redirected their attention to helping Sophie arrange Tyler's gift display. Uncle Jake. Tyler bounded over with genuine enthusiasm. At 16, he was tall and athletic like his father, but with a warmth Ryan had never possessed. "Thanks for coming. Mom said you might not make it." The comment stung because I'd never indicated I wouldn't attend. Apparently, Ryan had been managing expectations about my participation in family events. Emma found Sophie near the gift table, and I watched my daughter navigate the social dynamics carefully. Sophie seemed genuinely happy to see her cousin, but their interaction carried undertones of the inequality that had defined their relationship. "Emma, I'm so glad you're here. Wait until you see what Tyler got from Grandma and Grandpa. It's incredible." The centerpiece of the gift display was a brand new MacBook Pro still in its Apple packaging with a card signed by my parents. Another expensive educational tool purchased with money they'd borrowed against their house. I mingled with relatives for the first hour, listening to conversations about family news and watching Ryan work the room like the successful attorney he pretended to be. He wore an expensive suit and spoke confidently about his latest cases, never mentioning the ethical complaints or financial struggles Sarah had documented. Around 2 o'clock, Ryan called everyone together for the gift opening ceremony. Tyler sat in a designated chair while family members gathered around cameras ready to capture his excitement. The gifts were predictably extravagant. Video game systems, expensive clothing, gift cards worth hundreds of dollars. My parents beamed with pride as Tyler unwrapped their MacBook, praising his academic achievements and promising he could use it for college applications. Emma watched from the back of the group holding the wrapped astronomy book we'd brought. When Tyler opened our gift, he seemed genuinely pleased, thanking us enthusiastically, while some relatives smiled politely at our modest contribution. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. "Before we have cake," I announced, standing up with my leather folder, "I'd like to share some family history that everyone should know about." Ryan's expression shifted instantly from confident host to wary adversary. He recognized the folder from previous family gatherings where I'd brought important documents. "Jake, this isn't really the time for serious discussions," he said with a laugh that sounded forced. "This is Tyler's day." Actually, this is exactly the right time because Tyler deserves to understand how his family has been operating. I opened the folder and pulled out copies of my grandmother's original letter, the one Ryan had hidden from the probate court. 3 years ago, when Grandma Helen died, she left specific instructions about her trust fund for her grandchildren, instructions that were never shared with our family. My mother frowned, moving closer. "What instructions? Ryan handled everything properly." "That's what I thought too, Mom. But I hired a private investigator to look into family finances, and what she found was shocking." Ryan's face had gone pale. "Jake, you're out of line here. You can't just make accusations at a family party." "These aren't accusations, they're documented facts." I began reading from my grandmother's letter her clear instructions that Emma and Sophie should receive equal distributions from the trust fund, with me serving as administrator to ensure fairness. This letter was supposed to be filed with the will and read to our family. Instead, it disappeared from the probate records. Emma never received a penny of her inheritance, while Sophie has received thousands of dollars. My father stepped forward, his face grave. "Let me see that letter." As Dad examined the document, I pulled out bank records showing the systematic transfers from the trust fund to Sophie's accounts and from my parents' savings to Ryan's business. Over the past 2 years, Mom and Dad have given Ryan over $130,000 while Emma and I struggled to pay basic expenses. But the money didn't go to temporary business setbacks. It went to funding a lifestyle Ryan couldn't afford while his law practice failed. The room fell silent except for Tyler's sharp intake of breath. Even the teenagers had stopped talking, sensing the gravity of what was unfolding. Furthermore, I continued pulling out the forged signature evidence. Ryan has been accessing Emma's trust fund using forged signatures with my name. He's been stealing money while creating documentation that would make it appear I was embezzling if anyone investigated. Ryan finally found his voice. "This is ridiculous. Jake is making these accusations because he's jealous of our success. He's bitter about his divorce and wants to blame someone else for his financial problems." But Uncle Tom stepped forward from the back of the room. "I've been waiting for someone to expose this for months. Helen specifically told me she was concerned about Ryan manipulating the trust fund. She asked me to keep watch, but I wasn't named in any legal documents." My mother looked devastated, her face crumpling as she realized the implications. "Ryan, is this true? Have you been lying to us about Jake's financial situation?" Before Ryan could answer, Tyler stood up from his chair, his young face flushed with anger. "Dad, I've known about this for months," he said, his voice shaking. "I heard you on the phone telling Grandma and Grandpa that Uncle Jake got promoted and didn't need money. I knew it wasn't true because Emma told Sophie she couldn't afford the class trip to Washington. You made me and Sophie lie about how much things cost." The teenager's confession shattered Ryan's defensive strategy completely. Even Amanda looked shocked, apparently unaware of the extent of her husband's deception. Sophie stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't know Emma's money was paying for my stuff. I thought Grandma and Grandpa were just being generous because they had extra money." Emma moved to comfort her cousin, showing a maturity that made my heart swell with pride. "It's not your fault, Sophie. You didn't know." My father had been studying the bank records and legal documents with the methodical attention of someone who'd worked with financial paperwork his entire career. "Ryan," he said quietly, "these numbers don't lie. You've been taking money under false pretenses and manipulating us into believing Jake didn't need help while his daughter was entitled to inheritance you stole." The weight of evidence was crushing Ryan's ability to maintain his facade. Family members who'd believed his stories about temporary setbacks and successful practice were seeing documented proof of systematic fraud and manipulation. "I can explain everything," Ryan said desperately. "The law practice hit some rough patches, and I was trying to protect the family from worrying. The money was always meant to be temporary loans." Temporary loans don't involve forging your brother's signature to steal from his daughter's trust fund, Marcus said from the doorway. I hadn't noticed him arrive, but apparently he'd been listening to the entire confrontation. As a police detective, Marcus's presence added weight to the legal implications Ryan was facing. The question now, I said looking around at the assembled family, is what we're going to do about this. Emma has been cheated out of her inheritance and her relationship with her grandparents. Our parents have been manipulated into financial jeopardy. And Ryan has committed multiple felonies. The birthday party had become a family reckoning that would determine whether truth and justice could triumph over years of manipulation and favoritism. But for the first time since Thanksgiving, Emma was standing in a room where adults were fighting for her rights instead of ignoring them. The conversation was just beginning, but already the balance of power in our family had shifted dramatically. The week following Tyler's birthday party felt like watching a controlled demolition in slow motion. Ryan's carefully constructed world began collapsing piece by piece as the consequences of his deception rippled through every aspect of his life. Monday morning brought the first major development. Amanda called me at work, her voice shaky and exhausted. "Jake, I need you to know that I had no idea about any of this. Ryan told me your parents were helping us voluntarily because the practice was going through a temporary rough patch. I never knew he was lying about your salary or stealing from Emma's trust fund. Amanda, I never thought you were involved. I'm filing for separation. I can't stay married to someone who would steal from his own niece. Tyler and Sophie are devastated, but they understand why I can't pretend this didn't happen." By Tuesday, word of Ryan's legal troubles had reached his law firm. The State Bar Association opened a formal investigation, and his partners scheduled an emergency meeting to discuss his status with the practice. The client fund investigation that had been simmering in the background suddenly became a priority case. Wednesday brought a call from my father that I'd been both expecting and dreading. "Jake, your mother and I want to come over tonight to talk with you and Emma. We owe both of you an apology and we need to figure out how to make this right." They arrived at 7 in the evening looking older and more fragile than I'd ever seen them. My mother's eyes were red from crying, and my father carried a folder of financial documents. Emma greeted them politely but without her usual enthusiasm. The damage to their relationship wouldn't be easily repaired. "Sweetheart," my mother said to Emma, "I need to tell you how sorry I am. Grandpa and I made terrible mistakes because we believed lies about your family's situation. We should have paid attention to you instead of just listening to your uncle." "It's okay, Grandma," Emma replied with more grace than any 14-year-old should have to show. "I just want to understand why you thought I didn't deserve the same things Sophie got." My father spoke up, his voice gruff with emotion. "We thought your dad was doing well financially and didn't need help. Ryan kept telling us about Jake's promotion and salary increase that we now know never happened. We thought you were being taught good values about not being materialistic." "But I was never materialistic," Emma said quietly. "I just wanted you to remember my birthday and come to my school events and maybe help with things I needed for education, like you did for Sophie." The honesty in my daughter's voice brought fresh tears to my mother's eyes. "We're going to fix this," Dad said firmly. "I've been working with our attorney to transfer all remaining trust fund money to accounts Jake controls. Emma will get every penny she was supposed to inherit, plus interest." "What about the money you gave Ryan?" I asked. "We're considering our legal options. Our attorney says we can pursue recovery through civil court, especially now that we know the money was obtained through false pretenses." Thursday brought more dramatic news. Ryan's law firm suspended him pending the outcome of the Bar Association investigation. The client fund audit had revealed discrepancies that went beyond what anyone had suspected. Several clients were filing complaints about missing settlement funds. Emma's therapist, Dr. Sarah Martinez, whom we'd started seeing after Thanksgiving, provided valuable perspective during our session that week. Emma has been processing years of emotional neglect disguised as character building, Dr. Martinez explained. The favoritism she experienced wasn't just about gifts. It was about feeling fundamentally less valued than her cousin. Recovery will take time. "How do I help her trust family relationships again?" I asked. Consistency. Your parents need to demonstrate through actions over months and years that they value Emma equally. Words aren't enough after this level of betrayal. Friday evening brought an unexpected phone call from Ryan. His voice sounded defeated, completely different from the confident attorney who'd dominated family gatherings. "Jake, I need to talk to you about making this right." "I'm listening." "My lawyer says the criminal charges are probably unavoidable, but I want to minimize the damage to Emma and the rest of the family. I'm willing to cooperate with full restitution if you'll consider not pursuing the most serious felony charges." "Ryan, you forged my signature to steal money from my daughter's education fund. You manipulated our parents into financial jeopardy. You tried to frame me for your crimes. What exactly are you offering, Fi?" "Full repayment of Emma's stolen inheritance plus damages. Public admission of what I did to the extended family. Resignation from handling any family legal matters. And I'll enter a plea agreement that includes professional counseling and community service." The offer was more comprehensive than I'd expected, but it didn't address the fundamental question of trust. "I need to discuss this with Emma and our attorney," I said. "This isn't just about money anymore. It's about whether our family can function with honesty and fairness." Over the weekend, Emma surprised me with her maturity in discussing Ryan's plea offer. "Dad, I want Uncle Ryan to get help, but I also want to make sure he can't do this to anyone else. If taking a plea deal means other people might get hurt by him later, maybe that's not the right choice." My daughter's sense of justice impressed me. She was thinking beyond her own situation to consider broader consequences. Monday brought the final piece of shocking evidence that sealed Ryan's fate. Sarah Coleman called with information that changed everything. "Jake, I found records showing Ryan has been doing this to other people too. He's been manipulating elderly clients' estate planning to benefit himself. The state attorney general's office wants to talk with you about cooperation in a much larger investigation." "How much larger?" "We're talking about potential theft from multiple families over several years. Your case might be the key that exposes systematic fraud affecting dozens of victims." The revelation that Ryan had been stealing from vulnerable clients eliminated any possibility of a lenient plea agreement. This wasn't just about family dysfunction. It was about a pattern of criminal behavior that threatened innocent people. Tuesday evening, my parents called with news that crystallized our family's future direction. "We've decided to sell the house," my father announced. "We can't afford the mortgage payments anymore, and we want to use whatever equity remains to establish proper college funds for Emma, Tyler, and Sophie." "You don't have to sacrifice your home for this," I protested. "Yes, we do," my mother said firmly. "We enabled Ryan's behavior by not asking hard questions. We're responsible for fixing what we helped break." As the week ended, I realized we were witnessing something unprecedented in our family history. The total collapse of denial and favoritism being replaced by accountability and fairness. Ryan would face justice for his crimes. Emma would receive her stolen inheritance, and our family relationships would be rebuilt on foundations of honesty rather than manipulation. The cost was enormous. Ryan's career, my parents' home years of trust that would take decades to rebuild. But for the first time since Emma was born, she was experiencing what it felt like to have family members fight for her rights instead of explaining why she didn't deserve them. The legal proceedings would continue for months, but the emotional healing had already begun. 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen of our new 3-bedroom house watching through the window as Emma and Sophie practiced soccer in the backyard. The home sat in a quiet neighborhood with good schools purchased with a combination of Emma's recovered inheritance money and a mortgage I could actually afford. More importantly, it represented a fresh start built on truth instead of manipulation. The house was bigger than our old apartment, but not extravagant. Emma had chosen paint colors for her room, a soft blue that reminded her of summer skies. She'd insisted on having a guest room so Sophie and Tyler could visit regularly, showing a generosity of spirit that amazed me daily. "Dad, can Sophie stay for dinner?" Emma called through the back door. "I want to show her my history project before she goes home." "Of course, sweetheart, I'll call Amanda." The girls' friendship had not only survived our family's upheaval, but had grown stronger. They'd worked through their complicated feelings about the years of unequal treatment, supporting each other as our extended family learned new patterns of interaction. Sophie had initially felt guilty about receiving money and opportunities that should have been shared with Emma. With help from family therapy sessions, both girls came to understand that children weren't responsible for adult decisions about favoritism and fraud. Amanda answered her phone on the first ring, her voice warm and relaxed in ways I remembered from before. Ryan's legal troubles consumed everything. Sophie would love to stay for dinner. Things have been so much calmer since the divorce was finalized. Amanda had indeed filed for divorce 3 months earlier after Ryan pled guilty to multiple counts of fraud and embezzlement. She'd received custody of both children and was rebuilding her life as a single mother with support from our extended family. How are Tyler and Sophie adjusting to the new normal? Better than I expected. Tyler says he's relieved not to have to keep track of his father's lies anymore. Sophie enjoys having grandparents who ask about both girls equally. And frankly, I'm grateful to be away from Ryan's manipulation. Ryan was serving an 18-month sentence in minimum security prison, followed by 3 years of probation and community service. The state attorney general's investigation had revealed he'd stolen from 7 different families, using his position as an attorney to manipulate elderly clients and their estates. The criminal proceedings had been difficult for our entire family, but they'd also brought closure. Emma watched her uncle face consequences for his actions, learning that justice sometimes requires patience, but ultimately prevails. My parents had indeed sold their house, moving in with Uncle Tom and Aunt Carol while they figured out their next steps. The transition had been hard on their pride, but good for their relationships with Emma and me. Margaret had become a different grandmother, entirely calling Emma weekly to discuss school projects and attending every debate team event. She'd enrolled in financial literacy classes to better understand how she'd been manipulated, determined never to be fooled again. Paul had taken a part-time job at a local hardware store, enjoying the physical work and honest interactions after years of complicated family dynamics. He spent Saturday afternoons teaching Emma practical skills like changing oil in our car and fixing leaky faucets. You know, he'd told me the previous weekend, I should have been doing this kind of thing with you when you were Emma's age instead of just worrying about paying bills. The most surprising development had been Tyler's relationship with our family. Now 17, he'd started calling me regularly for advice about college applications, job interviews, and general life guidance. Without Ryan's negative influence, Tyler was free to develop genuine connections with relatives he'd been taught to see as less successful. Uncle Jake, he'd said during his last visit, I want to study social work in college. Watching what happened to our family made me realize how much damage people can do when they manipulate others. I want to help families avoid what we went through. Emma's academic performance had soared once she felt secure in her family relationships. Her grades improved dramatically, and she joined the mock trial team where her natural sense of justice found productive expression. I might want to be a lawyer someday, she'd told me recently, but the kind who protects people instead of stealing from them. The financial recovery had been more complete than I'd dared hope. Emma's trust fund was fully restored, with interest creating a substantial college fund that would cover tuition at any university she chose. Additionally, civil judgments against Ryan had provided restitution for our family's pain and suffering. I'd used part of the settlement money to take Emma on a trip to Washington, D.C., the same educational experience she'd been unable to afford while Sophie traveled to Europe on stolen funds. Watching Emma explore museums and monuments with genuine excitement had been worth every dollar. Our house had become a gathering place for extended family in ways our apartment never could. Uncle Tom hosted poker nights in our basement while Aunt Carol taught Emma and Sophie cooking skills in our kitchen. The natural interactions felt healthier than the strained holiday obligations of previous years. Jennifer, our neighbor and Emma's 7th grade teacher, had become an important part of our lives. She'd initially reached out to discuss Emma's academic progress, but had stayed to become a friend, and eventually something more. Emma adored her and Jennifer's patient, nurturing approach complemented my sometimes overly protective parenting style. "I love how you and Jennifer talk about everything honestly," Emma had told me. "It's so different from the way Uncle Ryan used to manipulate conversations to get what he wanted." The dinner table conversation that evening reflected our family's new dynamics. Sophie and Emma discussed their upcoming high school choices with equal input from grandparents, who now paid attention to both girls' interests and abilities. "I think I want to try out for the debate team next year," Sophie said. "Emma makes it sound really interesting." "That's wonderful, dear," Margaret replied. "Your grandfather and I would love to come watch your competitions." "You'd do that for both of us?" Sophie asked, still sometimes surprised by equal treatment. "Of course we would," Paul answered firmly. "That's what grandparents are supposed to do." After dinner, while the girls worked on homework and the adults cleaned dishes, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this point. The cost of seeking justice had been enormous. Ryan's imprisonment, my parents' financial devastation, years of family therapy to rebuild trust. But the benefits were immeasurable. Emma was growing up in a family that valued her equally and honestly. Sophie and Tyler were learning healthy relationship patterns instead of manipulation tactics. My parents were developing genuine connections with their grandchildren instead of showering one with gifts while ignoring another. Most importantly, Emma was learning that she deserved respect and equal treatment lessons that would serve her throughout life. She'd seen her father fight for her rights and win, teaching her that justice sometimes requires courage, but is always worth pursuing. As I tucked Emma into bed that night, she asked a question that showed how much she'd processed about our family's transformation. "Dad, do you think Uncle Ryan understands now why what he did was wrong?" "I hope so, sweetheart. People can change if they're willing to face the truth about their behavior." "I hope he gets better," Emma said thoughtfully. "Not because I want to forget what happened, but because I don't want him to hurt anyone else." Her capacity for forgiveness without forgetting impressed me. Emma understood the difference between wanting someone to heal and excusing their harmful actions. The legal proceedings were finally complete, but more importantly, our family had established new traditions based on honesty, equality, and genuine care for everyone's well-being. Emma would never again receive dollar store socks, while her cousin got European vacations because the adults in her life had learned to recognize and reject manipulation. Standing in the doorway of Emma's room, watching her read before sleep in a house we owned together, I realized we'd accomplished something remarkable. We'd taken a family built on favoritism and fraud and transformed it into one based on truth and fairness. The fight had been worth every difficult moment because Emma would grow up knowing that she deserved love, respect, and equal treatment. And perhaps most importantly, she'd learned that sometimes protecting what's right requires the courage to challenge people you love. Our family wasn't perfect, but it was honest, and that made all the difference in the world. Have you ever had to choose between keeping family peace and fighting for what's right? The hardest decisions often involve standing up to people we love when they're treating us unfairly. Emma's story shows that sometimes the most loving thing we can do is refuse to accept less than we deserve. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have confronted your family about the favoritism, or would you have tried to keep the peace for the sake of family harmony? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about family dynamics, justice, and the courage it takes to protect the people we love. And don't forget to share this video with someone who might need to hear that they deserve equal treatment and respect. Thank you for listening to Emma's journey from being overlooked to being valued. Remember, everyone deserves a family that sees their worth, and sometimes that means being brave enough to demand the respect we've earned. Until next time, keep fighting for what's right, even when it's hard.